Here's a look at today's headlines. 3 people were killed, including a 6-year-old boy, and 12 others were wounded. This in a shooting at the Gilroy Garlic Festival in Northern California. This following a suspect donning tactical gear and carrying an assault rifle opened fire. This is according to witnesses at the festival on Sunday evening. And President Trump will nominate a Texas congressman to replace outgoing intelligence chief Dan Coats. In a tweet on Sunday, Trump announced that Texas Representative John Ratcliffe, quote, will be nominated by me to be the Director of National Intelligence, end quote. Trump added, quote, a former U.S. attorney, John will lead and inspire greatness for the country he loves, end quote. For more on these and other stories leading and making news, please visit us at Newsmax.com.
Welcome back. It's Money Monday edition of Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John Tobacco, coming in as we do every day from the Newsmax headquarters here in Midtown Manhattan. You are watching us in the Question Tequila Studios. Our sponsor, Question, is doing some great things. Next week, on August 3rd, they're going to be down in Nashville, Tennessee, doing a special fundraiser and a concert with Johnny Carter Cash and the Nashville Knights of the Legends Football League, a ladies pro football team. And it's all going to be to benefit a new organization called Play Like a Girl, which is raising money to encourage girls to get involved in team sports. And Question is always there for us, and they're expanding who they're there for across the country, starting in Tennessee, August 3rd. And we call it Money Monday because we bring in the guests who are on the money. And joining us today in the think tank spotlight, it's Rafael Mangual. And Rafael is a fellow and deputy director at the Manhattan Institute. And we've had other members of your prestigious team here on Liquid Lunch before. And of course, Frankie joins me again. And you're the director of legal policy. And you write about overcriminalization and the real case of what's going on in the jails. And give us some observations what those people at home, they don't know.
Yeah, look, there's been a kind of prevailing narrative about criminal justice reform in this country, and it's captured people on both sides of the aisle, right? You've got President Trump hitting Joe Biden for, being involved with the '94 crime bill, and you've got Kamala Harris hitting Joe Biden for the same thing, contributing to mass incarceration. So, it's kind of easy to excuse the general public for believing the following, which is that our criminal justice system is both racist and overly punitive, such that it incarcerates a large number of people for low-level and nonviolent offenses for very long periods of time, right? That's what the majority of Americans seem to believe, when in fact the reality is just the opposite, right? We're told that this war on drugs has kind of driven the increase in the number of people behind bars in this country. Turns out that's not true. One of the things they like to point to in the way of statistics is that about half the federal prison population is in on a drug offense, which is true. But the federal prison population is only about 10% of our overall prison population. Criminal justice is a state-level phenomenon. And when you look at our state prisons, for example, less than 15% of them are less than 15% of inmates are serving time for a drug offense. You've got 4 times as many serving time for just one of 5 offenses: murder, rape/sexual assault, robbery, burglary, or simple assault. Or aggravated assault. That's 60% of the prison population.
What percentage of the prison population, including states, are African American?
It's a pretty big chunk. I don't have the number off the top of my head. It's probably right around 30%.
Around a third.
They're definitely, people like to say they're overrepresented as to the proportion of the population that they make up, right? And they like to concentrate on these sort of enforcement disparities when it comes to minority communities. But here's one of the things that I don't think they pay enough attention to, which is the victimization rates, right? If you look at black men, for example, they make up about 7% of the national population, but they make up about 50% of America's murder victims, right? And we know that murder tends to be an intra-racial phenomenon. So it becomes a lot easier when you're aware of these statistics to understand that police are deploying their limited resources into neighborhoods with the highest levels of crime. And it's that high level of crime that leads to those disparities, not racial animus.
So, Rafael, you make such an interesting point in your story in City Journal, which we're going to link to on our Twitter at Liquid Lunch TV, and I want to encourage folks to read. But about the number of state prisoners versus federal prisoners. But the first bipartisan initiative in the Trump era, and we all know how everything is so polarized these days, was criminal justice reform. You saw Cory Booker and Van Jones right there with Donald Trump and Jared Kushner. And conservatives seemed all for this because, hey, look, it costs a lot of money to put people in prison. But it sounds like what you're saying is this bipartisan initiative, which everyone was bragging about taking credit for.
The First Step Act does a lot of things, some of which are good, some of which are not so good. The not so good things, I'm thankful for this. It only relates to the federal prison population, which again, as I noted, is only a small portion.
10% of all those incarcerated.
So it's really going to, and it only applies to a small portion of that population. So it's really going to function as kind of an experiment. But people like Van Jones and Cory Booker, they are committed to much broader ideas. For example, the hashtag Cut 50 initiative, which was co-founded by Van Jones.
They want to cut the prison population.
They want to cut the prison population.
So the president was wrong, and Joe Biden, at least in the 1990s, was right.
That's right. And I wrote an article about this in the Wall Street Journal about a month and a half ago now, saying that Joe Biden ought to have stood by what he did in the mid-1990s. What people don't understand is that incarceration was responsible for about 25% of the violent crime decline through the 90s and 2000s. That's a huge chunk of lives saved, of property saved, of peace of mind that we can't take away.
So you make a great point about the racial disparity not being racist just because there are more black people in prison than white people. But you can't take away the fact that there are more people locked up in this country, whether it's state prisons or federal prisons, than any other country on the face of this earth. How is that not a problem?
It's not a problem because you have to look at what's driving that international disparity, right? So everyone likes to point to Western European democracies as the level that we ought to try and get to.
Yeah.
But the thing is that we have a lot more crime than these Western European democracies. This is something that Democrats, in the context of the gun control debate, really love to point out. They constantly say, well, we have so many more shootings than England and Wales or France, et cetera. Well, guess what? That also explains why we have so much more prisoners. The other thing, too, is resources, right? When you start comparing the United States, one of the richest countries in the free world, to other nations, it becomes very clear that we have a lot more in the way of public resources to dedicate to law
Rafael,
enforcement.
my last question, I only have about 30 seconds left. You had a great op-ed in the New York Post about Tiffany Caban, who's one of these criminal justice reformers running for DA in New York. But we've seen criminal justice reformers elected in Philadelphia. They're running for DA all over the country.
That's right.
Why is this so dangerous?
It's dangerous because there's no political accountability, really. I mean, once these people take office, they can start undoing laws without ever holding a vote, right? This is an end run around the political process that we ought to be really worried about, and we know that these policies are associated with it crime increases, and we're seeing that in Philly.
So the country, the top 10 cities in the country for rats are all run by Democrats, so that's not a good sign. That comes straight from our rat stat department. But, you know, we try to give all sides of the story. And, you know, I thought the First Step Act was a really good way for Trump to show that he does care about some minorities who are unfairly prosecuted. And I like hearing your side also, and I appreciate it. Thanks for coming down. Thank you for being here. Don't go anywhere. We're coming back right after this.
And that's why millions are tuning into Newsmax TV, America's fastest-growing news channel, already in 65 million homes. Download our free app from your smartphone and watch us anywhere in the world. Newsmax TV. Real news for real people. Every minute, every day.